Hello, I'm Molly Cooper, and this is a Snapshot episode where we bring you inside scoops from the travel, design, and creative spheres. It's the same Curator Spaces content, now in coffee break conversations.
Today we're talking all about seasonality, and in particular eating with the seasons. I'm so happy to welcome Blanche Vaughan, House and Garden's food editor, who has also worked as a chef at some of London's most loved restaurants, including the River Cafe and St John's. She's now just released House and Garden's first new cookbook in decades, A Year in the Kitchen, which is a collection of recipes that make the most of each season. Blanche, welcome to Creative Spaces. I can't wait to get into all of this. How are you doing today?
Hi, Molly. It's really lovely to be here with you today, and I'm looking forward to chatting.
Me too. It makes two of us. Well, shall we get into it then and talk a bit about you first? Because I'd love to hear about your journey and your story to where you are today.
Right. Well, it's been a really fun journey, and I have to say I was lucky in that I kind of knew what I wanted to do from early on. As soon as I left school, I knew that I wanted to pursue this career in food. And to cut a long story short, I found my way to Italy, where I lived for almost 2 years, exploring food, learning about their food culture and learning the language at the same time. And that was just a wonderful lesson in the sort of rudiments that have been the foundation of my cooking, which is good ingredients, cooked simply and served in an unfussy way. From there, I came back to London, and I actually did a couple of shifts in a restaurant owned by a wonderful British chef called Alistair Little in Soho. And a couple of shifts there were enough to teach me two things. One, that I wanted to cook in restaurants, and two, that I wasn't ready for it yet. So off I went, and I did a year at Leith's School of Food and Wine. It was a diploma course. And it was very interesting because it wasn't the kind of cooking I wanted to do, but it was teaching me technically how to be a really good cook, which, of course, when I got my first job in a restaurant, which was Morrow in Clerkenwell, owned by the wonderful Sam and Sam Clark, who had met and trained at the River Cafe, I sort of shed all those, very properly taught cooking school techniques for the fast and furious methods of a restaurant kitchen. But it was such a great place to learn. They were really nurturing, and we did really natural cooking. We first of all they were very interested in seasonality, but they were specifically inspired by Moorish cuisine. So Eastern Mediterranean, Spanish, Moroccan. So there were loads of spices and wonderful flavors and balances in their food. But we cooked amazingly over charcoal, and they had a wood-fired oven. They had a stove as well, but we're in Clerkenwell, in a really quite central part of London, and we're cooking in this way that has since become very fashionable. But they, I think, were amongst the first to be doing that. After a few years there, I moved on to the River Cafe, where they also cook, as you know, in that wonderful wood-fired oven. And it was there that I really understood what good ingredients meant in cooking. Ruthie Rogers, the chef proprietor of River Cafe, who was married to Richard Rogers, the architect, who's sadly died now, but she always used to say to me, Mies van der Rohe always said, less is more. And she was absolutely right. And that was the sort of philosophy of their cooking. And I really admired that. They would get in the most incredible ingredients I'd ever seen. These baskets of food would arrive obviously from Italy, because they were cooking a lot of Italian food, but they also sourced wonderful things from the UK. The fish was all dayboat caught and would come in that day. They didn't even know what they were going to be cooking often until that morning, when the fishmonger turned up and they chose what they wanted. Or the vegetables at the right time of year were some were grown on this farm in Essex, Suffolk border, and the guy would turn up with these baskets of food that he'd picked from the garden. So I really understood sourcing and seasonality when I was working there. Between there and St John, I had a couple of months off. So I'd worked at the River Cafe for a few years. I wanted to move on and learn a slightly different style of cooking. So I got a job at St John and I had a summer off, and Rose Gray, who was the other chef proprietor of the River Cafe, said to me, "You must go and work at Chez Panisse in California over the summer," which I did. So off I went with my bundle of knives. And I arrived in California and I really understood where actually a lot of the influence for the River Cafe had come from, because Alice Waters, the owner of Chez Panisse, had really brought, we now feel very comfortable saying farm to table, but this was something that had actually established itself over 20 years before, with places like Chez Panisse, where they had a real relationship with the people that were growing their food. And that was something that I was able to experience as an informal worker, as it were, or an informal, I didn't have a contract because I was only working there for the summer. So on my days off, she'd send me off to the farms to meet the farmers who were growing their food. They had this incredible farmers market culture out there. They still do. And of course, so much can grow in California. So the range was extraordinary. Anyway, that was my grounding. And that has carried on through my work, in fact, to the point where I would say it really defines me.
Yeah, and I think that's amazing. And I was so interested to hear from you and your perspective with growing up or like working in this industry, how you'd seen this sort of shift. But it sounds like good seasonal ingredients has always been at the heart of what you like to cook and tried to cook. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it feels like at the moment everyone's trying to eat more seasonally. I was just telling you about my own attempts and having to like cut down on avocados, and it feels like it's having a boom along with these other big sustainability themes. But that's amazing that even sort of 20 years ago there were restaurants really leading the charge and that you got to see that and experience that.
Absolutely. And it was something that I grew up with as well. My mother had a vegetable garden, so obviously we'd go out and pick what was growing in there, or we'd go down the hedgerows foraging. So I've always understood how it's a very natural thing to eat seasonally. So if anything, I'm just so excited that people are getting into it again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think you're absolutely right. It's becoming a movement, and I'm noticing it in the shops. I'm noticing specialist greengrocers popping up. I'm noticing farmers markets being more of a pop. Farmers markets are they're kind of a leisure activity as much as anything, and I think it's so nice for people to take their kids and to see food displayed in a way that isn't in a supermarket aisle, and to see the weird and the warty and the colourful. And I've just come back from New York, where I obviously made a trip to the farmers market. Most people go to their favourite clothes shops or their art museum, but my first place is the farmers market. And the way that the food is laid out and displayed, it shows such respect for the ingredients. And the other really crucial thing, which I think is becoming a little bit more common now in our experience of food, is you have the opportunity to meet and talk to the person that actually grew it. And I've noticed, the supermarkets are picking up on that story, as they like to call it, where they might name the grower, even if it's a huge industrial farm. But the point is that people like to look below the surface, and they like to know where things are coming from. And I think that's one of the things that one can do often in the farmer's market is, get right to the root of the matter. Sorry for the pun.
No, absolutely. And I think it's so interesting because at first thought you're like, well, it's obviously much better for the environment. all the sustainability stuff, but it's actually incredibly grounding. And I think a lot of people are sort of looking for that, to feel connected to the cycles we live in and to communities. And it's such a humble way of tapping into your local food producers and growers and feeling part of that and in tune with the seasons. So I think that's definitely a huge draw, like you say, the human
I
side.
think you're absolutely right, and I think that with the sort of overabundance of food that we have available to us, there can be a sense of homogenization. And I think what something like a farmer's market or even your greengrocer, or even just looking at what's in the sort of seasonal section in a shop offers, is it offers a reminder that the year is full of is a rhythm, and each part of the year is offers different produce. It offers a different way that we feel like eating. We want to eat different food in autumn to what we want to eat in spring, and food is represents the way we feel as much as as much as what it is that's sort of growing in the ground. And I think that that's something that people have connected to. And I think realistically, people's first priority is that it tastes nice, what they're eating.
Mm-hmm.
And the sustainable thing is taken up by, fewer rather than the many. But what's the sort of magic about seasonal eating is that if you do eat food in season, it tastes better. It tastes better, and
Yeah.
it cooks better. And for even people who aren't that experienced at cooking, you will find that your food tastes better if you use good ingredients. It's simple as that. And that I find is such a pleasure. It's like the food's nature's reward to us for eating what we should be eating at that time of year.
I know, when you said that, I was thinking those first strawberries you have at the start of the summer
Oh,
always just taste so
yes,
good,
and
don't
freshly
they?
dug new potatoes, they taste incredible. Or even, some people, I have this friend and we were laughing about beetroot. I love beetroot, but there's something reproachful about an uncooked beetroot in your fridge because you think, oh God, that's at least an hour. However, I've got two tips on that. First of all, as soon as you buy your beetroot, cook it, even if you're not planning on eating it, because cooked beetroot, looking at you in the fridge, is something you can
Mhm.
make a delicious meal out of really quickly. And my other tip, or not tip, but my other, bit of knowledge to share with things like root vegetables is the fresher they are, the quicker they cook. So,
Ah,
a roasted beetroot could take an hour and a half if it's been stored for months and months, or
mhm.
it could take, 30 minutes in a hot oven if it's
Well, there you
fresh.
go. I did not know that. I'm tempted to run
Yeah.
out and buy some beetroot and give it a go.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and if you can see leaves attached to things, it's a
Mhm,
brilliant sign of how fresh they are, because obviously if the leaves are looking sad and wilted, then they're no good. Or not no good, but they've been sitting around for longer. I love using the leaves of, for instance, beetroot leaves I cook in the same way that I would cook chard or spinach. So it's like a
mm.
bonus ingredient. And that's the kind of thing that one can get if you buy things in a shop or a farmer's market, or even maybe in a supermarket, but where they're not all sort of chopped and prepared and put in a plastic bag.
Mhm. You get some leaves as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I call it added extra.
Exactly, and we could all do with a bit of added extra, couldn't we? And we have to talk about the book then, which is quite a nice segue from this idea of a year being a rhythm, the seasons come and go, and obviously that's sort of at the core of your new book. So I'd love you to introduce it, where the idea came from, and how you sort of went about bringing it to life.
Well, as you say, the name suggests a lot. It's called A Year in the Kitchen, and immediately I knew that the book would be seasonal.
Mhm.
Um, Firstly, because that's the way I cook, but secondly, because as food editor for House and Garden, I have to think monthly, because it's a monthly magazine, and And thinking monthly it's in some ways it's a challenge, because there are some months which are quite similar, or they feel quite similar, and for instance, I always find spring is that time, it's allocated 3 or 4 months, but actually sometimes it doesn't start for the first two and you still feel like you're in winter.
Yeah.
So I'm choosing the recipes that I think the readers are going to want to feel like eating and cooking and reading about at that particular time of year. It's easier in autumn. It's obviously easier in, winter, Christmassy period, and in high summer. But there are these sort of transitional seasons, I think, where we think about things in a slightly different way. Anyway, it is monthly, and I love that because it also allows me to focus really specifically on certain ingredients that don't stick around for long. So English asparagus, for instance, forced rhubarb, they're both really English things, that beautiful pink rhubarb that they sort of historically grow in the Yorkshire Triangle. And it's very romantic the way they've grown it historically, because they've grown it in barns which have been deprived of light, which is why it's forced, and therefore it's that beautiful pink color, and they harvest it by candlelight in order to prevent any artificial light getting to it. And they were able to grow it up there because there was a big coal industry and the sheds needed to be heated in order for the rhubarb to grow, and so it was cheaper for them to do it where the heat source was coming from. And I love these stories with the production of food as well, and the sense of regionality, Cornish earlies, those lovely early potatoes, because it's warmer in Cornwall, so they can come up then and the soil type is right. So it's a very seasonal book. And what I've done is I've divided it into the 4 seasons, but I've talked about this idea that, there is a sort of overlap often between 2 seasons at the beginning and the end. But also I've highlighted star ingredients of that season rather than try to be really comprehensive and talk about every single ingredient you might come across. I've talked about specific things. So, there's and things that I have a particular affinity with. So we have this wonderful organic farm a couple of miles away, and they do a lot of seed saving, which is a thing that farmers are getting into now rather than using hybrid seeds, and they're mad on growing leeks. So I've got quite a few dishes in my winter section where I'm cooking with leeks, and there's this wonderful wholemeal flat tart with leeks and potatoes and melted taleggio on top, which I think is the kind of thing one wants to eat in winter, right? And I've also mentioned, the stages that one can do, so you don't have to do the recipe from start to finish in order to have it ready for lunch. You might have made the pastry the day or the week before and stuck it in your freezer, and the leeks turn up in your veg box and you're pottering around on a Saturday morning, and so you gently saute them so they're lovely and sweet and soft, and you stick that in the fridge, and then when the lunchtime comes, it only takes half an hour to roll out your pastry, put your leeks and your potatoes and your taleggio on top, and there you go, you've got a lovely meal.
Oh, I love it.
Exactly, as you say. So yes, and then rhubarb, as I mentioned, I've got lots of desserts made with rhubarb. And I talk about tomatoes in the summer, amongst lots of other things that I grow in my garden. A lot of what I've written about in the book is inspired by either things that I grow in my own garden, which isn't very big, but anyway, I've got a tiny little greenhouse and it's just stuffed with tomatoes and basil in the summer. Or things that I get from my veg box from the community farm, which is a couple of fields away, or things that I've eaten when I've been traveling abroad that I've recreated at home in my own way, my own ingredients.
Oh, amazing. It sounds like such a special collection of not only recipes, but the stories behind them. I love how each one has like a headliner ingredient almost. I think that's really
Mm.
lovely and a really approachable way to start thinking about what you're cooking and eating.
And the other thing that I touch on a bit in the book is that, often it's not it's not just about the food. This is about giving people a way to cook that's not too difficult, that gives them an excuse to gather around the table, and to think about, if you are going to, put a couple of nice things on the table, how it really elevates that experience of eating. So
Yeah.
you might even just go outside and pick some leaves from the hedgerow, or you might walk past your flower shop and see that there's some sort of seasonal flower and get a few stems and put them on your table and light a few candles. And they're tiny little things you can do that make a huge difference. And I
Hmm.
just wanted to inspire people to think about how much one can sort of value the experience of eating.
Oh, I love that. And I think that really comes back to what we were talking about, the kind of human side, the grounding side of being together, being in tune with the cycles of nature, eating. They're such simple human things, but can really ground you and really help, especially in those winter months when things are a bit cold and dark. They really help, don't they?
Yes, my tip is keep lighting candles.
I love it. If in doubt, light another.
Exactly.
Oh.
They're cheap and plentiful, and they make a big difference.
Exactly. Well, I was wondering if you have any top tips or say someone's listening to this, they're feeling quite inspired to try and eat more seasonally, be a bit more in tune with what's in season, what's not. How would you recommend they get started? Do we all need to go out and buy some gardening gear and start digging our own veggie patches?
I think, well, given that most people are rushing back from work, they're grabbing something to make in a short space of time. I think try and bring a little bit of the feeling of leisure activity into your cooking. And
Mm,
if you do have a moment at the weekend, even if you're not going to go to your local farmers market, maybe go and have a look if you've got a greengrocer rather than a supermarket, or go to the supermarket and see what they've got that's seasonal, and you know put a few things in your basket without a specific idea of what you're going to do with them. And then,
mm,
as I said before about things like the beetroot and the leeks, and I do it as well if I have like a big bowl of onions building up, cook them for no reason at all, and use that as the beginning of something else. So I think the idea is to break down the cooking stages so that you're not scared by the amount of time that something is going to take in a full block. And just try something out that you haven't tried before. If you've never cooked with rhubarb, buy some rhubarb and give it a go,
yeah.
see what it tastes like, play around with it, or get a whole cauliflower and roast it,
Mhm.
cover it with tahini sauce, cover it with whatever you like to eat, the flavors that appeal to you. I think just it's like a bit by bit
Mhm.
um, kind of attitude. And I think that's a really nice way of getting into things.
Yeah, a very fun, approachable way. I really like that. And are there any recipes in your book that you think people should start with? Maybe if they're just trying cooking for the first time properly or looking to just give something a whirl, which ones would you look to recommend?
Absolutely. And I've really tried to make a lot of these recipes approachable. There's there's a recipe in the winter section, which is okay. So everyone loves a toad in the hole, right? You
Mm,
know,
yeah.
fluffy batter. Everyone has got those ingredients in their fridge already, mainly
Mhm.
milk, eggs, flour.
Yeah.
This one is with roasted vegetables. So this is quite a
Mm.
nice way of, buying those vegetables that maybe you don't normally get, sticking them in a pan in the oven with some oil, get them lovely and caramelized and roasty, pour the batter on, and that's a really easy way of not only serving food to a bunch of people, but also to taste how delicious these seasonal vegetables are. So that would be one. There's a recipe that I've been cooking a lot recently, which is courgette roasted with capers and slices of lemon and slices of onions. It's all caramelized and sweet. And then you get these
Mm.
little like bursts of salty floral caper. And then you serve that on a bed of lentils with a tiny bit of vinegar in to give them some acidity.
Oh, that sounds delicious. I love a
So that's a
courgette.
really easy one.
Mm.
And gratin of greens I make all the time. So if you want to go a step further and get your veg box delivered, whether it's a lot of people I know in the city get the veg box delivered, and you often find that you get a whole load of greens, and you get yeah, you get kale, and you get spinach, and you get chard, and you get more of that. Okay, so I've devised this gratin of greens where you basically you blanch or boil all those greens, you chop them up, you make a sort of bechamel type sauce, and you bake it in the oven with breadcrumbs and a little bit of grated cheese on
Ooh,
top,
lovely.
and it's an absolute winner. And sometimes I make extra and I just put it in the freezer, and then I can just pull that out, and I'm doing a roast chicken and I've got that, ready as my side dish. So
That sounds so good. I love a gratin. Anything creamy, I'm there.
yes, exactly. So yeah, there are lots of things, but I really think there's the recipes in this book are very
Mm.
approachable, and hopefully make people realize just how easy seasonal cooking is.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to go out and buy my copy and give some of them a go. I'll be trying that gratin for sure. And it's been so lovely to chat. Before we do go, I do have a quick fire round of
Yes,
questions
let's
for
do
you.
it.
Okay, let's do it. Are you more of a summer, spring, winter, or autumn kind of person?
Autumn.
Oh, and why is that?
Oh, I'm glad you were surprised by that. I love the colours. I love the way the sun is low, and the color of the light is warm, and yet the air is cold. And also, it's a wonderful sort of, I was talking about seasons sort of overlapping each other in a sense. So you still get, the end of the summer, you get the dahlias, you get the end of the sort of summer, your last of your tomatoes, or you might get, your last bits of spinach, overlapping with the squash and the apples and the
Mhm.
nuts and the pears, and I find that it's almost like the most abundant season, I feel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I have to say England often looks its best with those crisp blue skies and not too hot.
Oh,
Mm.
yes, not too hot, exactly.
And what is your favourite dish to cook in the autumn then?
Well, I've got a couple. I just love anything with squash. And
Mm.
actually, this is a really easy dish as well. It's the old-fashioned English term for this is a flan, but this is a recipe that I learnt to cook in Italy, which they call a sformato, which is basically means misshapen, which I think gives you an excuse to make anything, quite frankly. But you do it in a you do it in a lovely sort of oval dish, and you whip up cooked pureed squash, sage, ricotta, eggs, and you bake it, loads of parmesan, and you bake it, and it sort of bubbles up a bit, and it's lovely and creamy and sort of custardy inside, but set. And you just have a great big spoonful of that and a green salad, and it's just the perfect warming autumnal lunch.
That sounds delightful. I can't wait to try that. And then from your time in Italy, well, what was your favourite place to live, and what was your favourite thing you learnt to cook there?
So my favorite place to live was probably Florence, not least because it's a very manageable size, and the central market in Florence is just fabulous. I had a little greengrocer who I live nearby, and he was very patient with me because I was really learning how to speak Italian. And I'd say most of the Italian I learned was corresponding with the greengrocer. I cooked things I took with me when I moved there, the Blue River Cafe cookbook, and the dish that I cooked the most, which is also a regional dish from that part of Italy, was a ribollita. And a ribollita is one of those fabulous soups that just keeps on giving. So the base is like a minestrone or a vegetable soup with carrot, onion, celery. It has stock or water, a little bit of squashed tomatoes, cavolo nero, and then borlotti beans, and maybe some torn up bits of old bread. And the ribollita means reboiled. And the idea is that you can just keep reheating it and it gets better and better with a slick of olive oil over the top. And it's the most delicious and warming soup that you can have.
That sounds delicious. Also, olive oil can just elevate anything. I mean,
Everything. I know. I probably spend more on olive oil than I do on wine.
essential.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is there anything you miss from your time in California, be it food or a way of cooking, living?
I miss a lot. I miss the amount of food that they were able to produce. So eating seasonally there would be much easier than eating seasonally here because there is so much. I also miss their inventiveness. I think because they don't feel so sort of harbored to traditions. There's so much invention there, and people come from all over the world, and they bring different aspects of cooking. So there's a wonderful sense of liberation in a way, and I really admire that. It's quite multicultural, and so lots of different influences. And I think it's a really exciting and inspiring way to cook.
Yeah, oh, that's so interesting. And then finally, if someone is starting out on their seasonal journey and they're inspired to try growing something of their own, what should they start with and what do you like to grow?
I always think chard is amazing. It is like the gift that keeps on giving. It never seems to stop producing, which is really, really very, very generous of it. However, if one wanted to grow something that is like high pleasure, a tripod of sweet peas that you just open, to eat peas fresh out of their pods that you picked straight from the plant is the most extraordinary experience, and something that you can only ever have when you're growing them yourself. And you don't need a lot of room, actually. You could grow them on a sort of plant pot on your balcony, even if you didn't have any outdoor space.
I love it. So there's no excuse whether you're in a little flat in London like me or out in the country, get planting those sweet peas.
Exactly. I want to come around and find sweet peas trailing all over the front of your house.
They will be, I promise. Oh, well, Blanche, it's been such a pleasure chatting. I'm feeling incredibly inspired by this talk. Thank you so much for coming to chat with me today.
Thank you so much, Molly, and I look forward to hearing about all the seasonal things you're going to be cooking.
Thank you for listening to this Snapshot conversation. For more Curated Spaces content, head to our website, Instagram, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.